Welcome to the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series, where we're meeting the top minds in STEM to learn more about their paths to success. I'm Sarah Williams, a science journalist. Talking with me today is Dr. Nicki Washington, a professor of the practice of computer science at Duke University, and the author of Unapologetically Dope, Lessons for Black Women and Girls on Surviving and Thriving in Tech. Dr. Washington previously spent 9 years at Howard University as the first Black female faculty member in the Department of Computer Science, and she's also devoted a lot of time to K-12 computer science education. Thanks so much for joining me today, Nicki. You have an impressive resume that spans both industry and academia. Tell me about your path that led you to computer science and to where you are today.
So my career path started in Durham, North Carolina, where I was born and raised. My mom was a computer programmer for IBM for her entire 34-year career, moving into management. And my dad was also a K-12 administrator and teacher. And so I was surrounded by a village of Black educators, engineers, and teachers who were not only my parents' friends, but also the parents of my friends. And it was really important for me to be able to see representation of all of the things that I could be growing up. There was no limit ever put on me for my career path or anything I was interested in. I was always taught that whatever you do, you just give it your all and you don't give up or quit. And so I got exposed to computing very early because working at IBM, my mom would always be able to order computers for our home at a discounted rate. And one of the activities she would always allow me to do was assembling that computer and putting the software together, loading anything else that needed to go on it. And once I became old enough, I started tinkering and programming. So my programming experience started about 8th grade, and then in high school, I took programming classes, but I never intended on majoring in computer science. I really had this interest in business for some reason, and I thought that maybe I would just minor in computer science on the side. But it was in college at Johnson C. Smith University that my intro programming professor, Dr. Nagib Atia, saw that there was a unique talent that I had. And when he inquired about why things seemed to come so easy for me in programming, I told him that I've been programming since 8th grade, so that wasn't new. And he was the person who really encouraged me to consider changing my major from business to computer science and maybe minoring in business. And so a lot of my experience has been me being prepared for opportunities that presented themselves, but the opportunities being presented and me taking advantage of them when they did. And that even went into my choices to pursue graduate studies because at the time, as a college student, I just wasn't ready to work. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I did not just want to be behind a desk programming all day. So graduate school gave me the opportunity to take that time to dig deeper into computing, to understand more about specific areas of interest, for example, networking, and then also figure out what's the best career path for me. And even as I pursued my initial career path, I started in industry, not knowing that academia would be where I would land permanently. And I spent 1 year at the Aerospace Corporation in Chantilly, Virginia. And mind you, even though I was a student from undergrad through grad school, I was also interning at IBM throughout those years. So I did have industry experience, but I really found that I enjoyed being in front of a classroom, talking to students and talking to people. And the opportunity just happened to present itself at the right time that Howard University was looking to fill a position for a tenure track faculty member. And at that time in 2006, they never had a Black woman on faculty in the computer science department. So I thought it would be a great way for me to not only get experience in academia and working with students, but also allow them to see representation of themselves in me.
What are you working on right now? Is there a particular project among all those interests that's taking up your time and energy?
Well, my research focuses on identity in computing, and I have two big things I'm working on right now. The first was a cultural competence in computing assessment, and I call it 3C assessment for short. So cultural competence, as a quick recap, is a topic that was born out of social work in the late 80s. And it was designed to be able to teach professionals who deal with individuals across various identities, especially vulnerable populations, how to best engage in cross-cultural communications. And so we need to start teaching computer science students, as well as faculty and industry professionals, how to better understand these topics of identity and how identity is impacted by computing environments and society, how identity impacts these same environments and society, and then how the technologies that are developed also impact specific identities in ways that can be harmful.
Why is it important to increase diversity and cultural competence in various organizations?
Well, we see a lot of times right now that the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in computing is resulting in technologies that are extremely harmful. For example, facial recognition technology does not properly recognize darker skin tones with the same accuracy. And just about a month ago, we learned that a man in Detroit was wrongfully jailed because of incorrect facial recognition technology. The same goes for healthcare algorithms. So there's software that helps to determine, based on historical data that it's been fed, how to best treat patients. The issue becomes that if you are a patient of color, and particularly Black patients, then you may be underdiagnosed due to this software because the data that it has been fed historically was measured using the fact that doctors often underdiagnosed Black patients. And if that data shows that Black patients allegedly had higher tolerances to pain, they were less susceptible to certain types of issues. If you have individuals who look like these same vulnerable populations at the table creating the technology, then it helps for other people to hear, hey, we need to try this across a diverse range of individuals and consider all possible options in terms of our test cases. But more important, in the event that you don't have people who represent all identities, you need people on the team who recognize the limitations of their own perspectives and are certain and intentional about testing for every possible scenario, even if that scenario does not include them.
Those are all really great points. So I assume you've very often been one of the few Black women in your department or within committees or boards you've worked on. How has that shaped your experience?
It's really been interesting because I feel like a lot of my professional and even academic career outside of two instances have always been the situation where I'm one of the few, if not the only. And I tell people that the only two instances where that was not the case was my time as an undergraduate at Johnson C. Smith University, which is an historically Black college and university in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then my experience for 9 years as a faculty member at Howard University, which is also an HBCU in Washington, D.C. Outside of those instances, it's always been a case where I have tried to make sure that I am seen and valued and that the perspective I bring is always at the forefront and considered in any decisions that are made. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always worked out in my favor, because it hasn't. It doesn't always mean that things go well for me or for other people that I represent or who look like me, because it hasn't. But it always guarantees that when I leave that room, when I leave that meeting, when I leave that course, that I have done everything I could to make sure that the people in front of me understand that I'm here because I deserve to be here. There are plenty of other people who look like me who deserve the same opportunities but may not be getting them right now. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you are being as inclusive as possible to make space for every single identity, even if yours is not a part of the space we're opening up. And I think that a lot of times being intentional, being unapologetic about it, and being assertive and having the audacity to say things that sometimes make people uncomfortable but are necessary to say is hard. But it's necessary, like we see right now in this country, because we have to get to a point where diversity is just expected and the norm. And right now that's not the case, especially even in computing and computer science. So I also say that if we focus on equity and inclusion, diversity will come by default. If you create environments that are inclusive for everyone, regardless of their identity, then you will create situations where people want to be there and not only come, but remain there. And that's the biggest piece. So when we focus only on diversity, the issue is that you can get people to the table, you can get students in the classes, you can get employees in the door, but can you keep them there? The only way you keep them there is by making the environment inclusive as well as equitable.
I think it surprises some people who maybe live in a little bit of a bubble of privilege that racism and sexism can still exist in places like college campuses. Even as an experienced academic, what kinds of challenges have you faced or seen colleagues facing that have nothing to do with your ability to do your job?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. One of the things that I talk about are issues of course evaluations. All of us will remember if we took a course in college and we had to complete a course evaluation. And some people really are considerate and thoughtful about it, but other people take that as a time to really use it against a faculty member. And plenty of research has demonstrated from organizations like the American Sociological Association and beyond, the bias that is present in course evaluations, particularly for women, and then also for minoritized groups, people of color, and also women for whom race and gender intersect. So if you are also a woman of color, then this is really a significant issue. And it's an issue that impacts your hiring, promotion, and tenure across your jobs. Some of the things that I've seen in qualitative feedback, and even in responses and conversations I've had with department chairs, was students who would complain that I was aggressive, I was rude, I was mean, because students would ask questions, and when a hand goes up, I'll tell students, it's not my job to directly answer your question. It is my job to get you to think through and understand how to solve problems. And so if I just tell you how to fix a problem, I'm not helping you learn. So it's my goal to make sure that I get you to think through it. So by me not answering a question, then it became I'm rude, I'm mean, because I'm assertive and confident, it was because I'm aggressive. And even I've seen comments that stated she has no gratitude. Now, these are things that a lot of times in higher ed, you don't hear when you are talking about white or Asian men who are faculty members. But you hear this a lot of times with women, and especially in the cases of women of color and Black women. There's often an idea of being subservient, having to package things in a sandwich where it's a positive, negative, positive. I've done a lot of talks and a lot of work around how do we get past these types of situations, especially in environments like higher ed, where these impact, like I said, your hiring, your promotion, and even tenure. There are a lot of women I've spoken to who have told me, thank you for having these kinds of conversations. And I remember one woman in particular telling me, I never went into higher ed because I always remember one of my professors who was a woman in grad school at the end of the course announcing to the class, please do not critique my course evaluation based on the way that I dress and look. So these are things that you would never hear a man state in an academic environment, but these are things that women always have to deal with. And now if you add to it the intersection of being Black and a woman, then it becomes even harder.
Are there easy or obvious first steps that you wish other academic researchers or administrators would take to help make the playing field more diverse and get rid of some of these issues in STEM fields?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest things that a lot of STEM faculty and administrators, and even just college administrators in general, need to understand is that there are systemic issues in higher education that are impacting not only the students, but the faculty. And they're impacting them in equal ways. One of the things that's really hard for a lot of faculty, depending on the type of institution that you're employed at, be it a predominantly white institution, historically Black college, Hispanic serving institution, or tribal college and university, is making sure that people understand that faculty are not a monolith. Women are not a monolith. People of color are not a monolith. And so when one or two faculty members come to you and say that there's a problem, just like one or two students come and say that there's a problem, being able to recognize that it took a lot for that student or those students or those faculty members to come and speak up and speak out, recognizing that, listening, digesting, and believing them is one of the first steps to making systemic changes across universities. We see that a lot of times on Twitter or in the news when we've seen examples of people who are deemed racist or homophobic or misogynist who are faculty, but because of academic freedom, their thoughts are still allowed to be shared without fear of retribution.
How can changes to K through 12 education or undergraduate education better encourage minority students to enter computer science? What should parents and educators be doing differently?
The first in terms of educators is to create safe spaces. I share often about my experience even in K-12 education and my experience with my 6th grade math teacher who was super upset because she didn't feel like Black History Month should be a thing in the middle of February, and she told the entire class that it was racist. And if we're going to have Black History Month, then we should have White History Month. And when I debated that and said, why does that need to be a thing when we're already taught white history 11 months out of the year, her response to me was, oh, Alicia, it's people like you that give Blacks a bad rep. Now, if this is what's being told to a 12-year-old child in the 6th grade who loves math, imagine how that moment could have stopped and deterred my entire career in STEM and computing. Because I instantly shut down and felt powerless. And as a 12-year-old, I didn't know what to do with that. But I knew that in talking to my mom, that she would advocate for me. She brought it to my father. They both constructed a plan of how to address this and push forward. And I'm grateful that I had a mom in computing as well as a father in K-12 education. But what happens for all of the students who don't have parents who work in these fields? We have to make sure that we're creating environments where students are safe to exist and be. And not only be, but be seen and be valued, and to not be criticized, critiqued, or degraded because they have a differing opinion. Again, we're seeing this a lot right now in K-12 education, where students of different identities are being challenged. They're dealing with issues of self-esteem and even suicide. And I think it's really important, especially as STEM educators, that we create spaces and narratives that show it's okay for you to thrive here. And not only that, we need you here. Also, it's important to start showing examples of individuals who represent all of these diverse identities. Because we see so many times when you ask a student to think about a computer scientist, they can quickly tell you Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, but they can't tell you the Richard Tapias or the Mark Deans and individuals like Mark Hanna who may look like them. So it's important that as we start to do this work, we not only engage them in different ways, but we also engage the students who don't represent minoritized identities, because they're the majority. And because they're the majority, we have to start focusing on how to teach them to be better advocates and activists, not just allies, to the students who need their support and who need their advocacy and their sponsorship. Once we start to do that in better ways, I think we'll start to change the narrative of who gets to be a computer scientist, who gets to represent the field, and more important, who gets to belong or feel like they belong.
Your book, Unapologetically Dope, gives specific advice to Black women and girls on how to thrive in tech fields. If you could pull one or two of your best nuggets of advice from the book, what would they be?
But it's really a book that is applicable to any woman, any girl in any field. I chose to author the book and title it intentionally because I know that there are no resources out there that center the voices and narratives of Black women and girls, especially in this field. But two of the nuggets that I would pull are, one chapter says, assemble your tribe. And what we mean is that every girl, every woman needs 5 people who are in their life to make sure that they are succeeding and being their best self at all times. You need the person who's called the motivator, who's often someone like your peer, your classmate, or your friend, who's also pushing you to excel in that friendly competition. You need someone I call the plug, who's the person who's connected and has resources and can point you in the right direction or make connections with the right people for you as you navigate academic and professional spaces. You need a straight shooter. And that straight shooter is the person who is straight to the point, who will always be honest with you, even if you don't want to hear what they have to say, but that's what you love the most about them. You need a cheerleader. And your cheerleader is the person who, I say, when that straight shooter makes you feel like you're just completely defeated, that cheerleader is going to build you up and pour into you and always root for you from the sidelines. And lastly, you need a sage. And that sage is a person who's all-knowing, wise, and has years of experience that can help you deal with situations that you'll face. The other thing that I tell readers is to make sure that you ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. And this is something that I've often struggled with myself throughout my academic and professional career, and even now, right? 2020 has been a crazy year for a lot of us, or all of us. And I think that it's important to say that I'm not okay and to be okay with that. We don't always have to have the answers. We don't always have to have things worked out.
So you didn't have a book like this to read early in your career. How did you learn those lessons? Did you just figure out yourself how to assemble a team and ask for help? Have you had really good mentors or used particular resources?
Being born and raised in Durham and in the time that I was really beneficial for me. Durham has a rich history of Black excellence, from the Hayti community, which was one of the original Black Wall Streets, in addition to Tulsa, as well as a community of Black engineers, teachers, and doctors who always made me believe that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And even to this day, I go to my mom every single day about something that's happening to get her advice. And what I found was that while she began her career in computing in 1972 through about early 2000s, the narratives don't change. It's just the people who change. The other thing I think was trial and error. Establishing a community through academic experiences and people that I've met along the way has always helped, which is why it's really good to make sure that you create meaningful connections with people who you meet, not only as an undergrad, but as a graduate student, as an intern, a future employee, current employee, and beyond. Because everyone plays a pivotal part in your life, and that part may not be as impactful as you understand it when it's happening. But as you progress throughout life, you'll start to understand how all of these people become your community and your support system. And that's who I really used, the combination of my personal experience as well as the conversations with my mother and with other girlfriends of mine who are in computing, to build this narrative of how do we start to help young women who may not have someone like me or my mom directly in front of them, but they can have this book that at any time, if there's any question or concern, they can always open it and know that I'm not the first person who's gone through this. I'm not going to be the last, but here's a blueprint for how I can start to navigate it a little bit better.
Great. Well, you have lots of fantastic advice. I think I need to be writing some of this down too. Our last question that we're asking everyone in this series is, what are you reading, watching, or listening to right now, STEM related or not?
So I'll be honest, I try not to indulge in too much STEM-related things outside of work because I feel like there's such an overlap right now between work and home. Music is a heavy part of my life. I tell people I think and operate in music. So I have a lot of different playlists. One of my favorite albums that I've been listening to for the last year and some change is Eve by Rhapsody. While I feel like Unapologetically Dope was a book love letter to Black women and girls, Eve and that entire album was Rhapsody's love letter to Black women and girls as well. And so it gives me a lot of motivation. Podcasts, I'm a huge fan of. Always love Code Switch. I'm a huge fan of Code Switch. And also in terms of TV, I'm a huge TV junkie. So any shows that are out right now, I'm probably watching. I definitely love Lovecraft Country. I'm not really sure I understand exactly what's going on throughout it because I have never read any of H.P. Lovecraft's work, and I'm not a huge sci-fi person, but I love the narratives that are being created and told. I love a lot of shows by Black creatives, for example, The Shy. My late night indulgence, I tell everyone, is King of Queens. So I go to bed, it's either King of Queens or Golden Girls.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
And a big thank you to all our viewers for joining us. I'm Sarah Williams, and this is the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series.